Your soulmate was caught last night. Who were they with? My beloved child, before your thoughts race toward conclusions, stay with this moment, because what was discovered last night was not what anyone expected. Everyone believed they had already solved the mystery. They thought they knew who your soulmate had been spending time with. But the closer the truth came into focus, the more every assumption began to fall apart. Have you ever noticed how the biggest turning points in life rarely arrive with loud announcements? They appear quietly, hiding behind ordinary moments, waiting for someone patient enough to recognize them. This is one of those moments. Keep listening, because every piece of this story connects, and the final picture is far different than the rumors surrounding it. Last night, someone noticed your soulmate in a place they were never expected to be. It wasn't the location itself that caught attention, it was the expression on their face. There was no mask. No performance. No attempt to impress anyone. Just a quiet look that seemed to carry months, perhaps years, of unanswered questions. From a distance, it looked as though they were meeting someone important. Naturally, whispers began. Curiosity spread faster than truth ever could. People created stories before they understood a single detail. Isn't that what often happens? The imagination rushes ahead while reality patiently waits behind. But here's the strange part. The person standing with your soulmate didn't appear to be pulling them away from you. Instead, every gesture suggested they were helping your soulmate confront something they had avoided for far too long. No dramatic confrontation. No betrayal. No secret celebration. Only a conversation so serious that even silence seemed louder than words. Imagine carrying thoughts you have hidden from the world for so long that speaking them aloud feels like stepping into a completely different future. That was the atmosphere surrounding the moment. What if the question isn't who they were with? What if the real question is why that meeting had to happen before your paths could truly move forward? Sometimes destiny doesn't reveal itself through grand miracles. Sometimes it arrives disguised as a difficult conversation, an unexpected encounter, or a moment that forces someone to become honest with themselves. Last night may have been exactly that kind of moment. The kind that changes a person's direction without anyone realizing it until much later. There is another detail that almost everyone overlooked. After that conversation ended, your soulmate didn't rush away with excitement. They paused. They looked toward the night sky for several long seconds, as though searching for clarity beyond everything they had just heard. People who witnessed it couldn't explain why that image stayed in their minds. There was something unforgettable about the stillness. It was the stillness of someone standing between an old chapter and a new beginning. Think about that for a second. When people are pretending, they usually move quickly. They avoid reflection. They escape uncomfortable thoughts. But someone standing completely still, someone willing to face silence, is often standing in front of a decision that could reshape everything. Now ask yourself this. Have you ever felt that life was quietly arranging pieces behind the scenes while you only saw scattered fragments? Most people give up because they judge the puzzle before all the pieces appear. Yet the greatest stories are never understood halfway through. They only make sense when the final connections emerge. This is why you shouldn't let appearances control your understanding. The rumors surrounding last night only reveal what people believe they saw. They do not reveal what truly happened inside that conversation. And those two things are rarely the same. There is an invisible difference between being seen with someone, and being transformed because of someone. That difference changes everything. As the night grew quieter, something even more unexpected happened. Witnesses noticed your soulmate leave with a completely different energy than the one they arrived with. Their shoulders seemed lighter. Their pace became steadier. Almost as if an invisible burden had finally been placed down after being carried for far too long. Nobody could explain it. They simply noticed the change. Changes like that never happen without a reason. They are usually the result of truth finally replacing confusion. But here is where the mystery deepens. The identity of the person beside your soulmate may not be the revelation everyone expects. In fact, discovering who they were with may become far less important than discovering what they realized during those unforgettable moments. And that realization, if understood correctly, could completely change the meaning of everything you've assumed until now. Stay with this story a little longer, because the next chapter doesn't begin with another rumor. It begins with the hidden reason that meeting had to happen, and why someone quietly walked away believing your soulmate's future had just taken a completely unexpected turn. Not every answer arrives the moment a question is asked. Sometimes the truth waits until your heart is ready to recognize it. So don't let your attention drift now, because what unfolded after that mysterious meeting reveals something almost no one expected. The night itself seemed ordinary, yet every step your soulmate took afterward carried the weight of a completely different future. This is where the story becomes impossible to ignore. As your soulmate walked away, they never looked back at the person they had been speaking with. That alone surprised everyone who noticed. If the meeting had been about beginning a new connection, wouldn't there have been smiles, excitement, or lingering conversation? Instead, there was calm. Quiet confidence. It looked less like the start of something new and more like the closing of something that had remained unfinished for far too long. Have you ever realized that the hardest conversations are often the ones that free us instead of trapping us? That seems to be exactly what happened. The whispers continued throughout the evening. People repeated the same question again and again. Who was that person? Every version of the story became more dramatic than the last. Some believed they had uncovered a hidden relationship. Others imagined a secret that would change everything forever. Yet none of them noticed the smallest detail, the one detail that quietly held the real answer. Your soulmate smiled. Not the smile of someone hiding the truth. Not the smile of someone pretending everything was perfect. It was the peaceful smile of someone who had finally stopped running from their own thoughts. That single moment speaks louder than 100 rumors. What if last night wasn't about another person entering their life? What if it was about removing the fear that had been standing between both of you all along? Think carefully. People often search for signs in the wrong places. They watch faces but ignore emotions. They follow footsteps but never notice direction. Destiny has a fascinating habit of disguising breakthroughs as ordinary evenings. While everyone focused on the mystery of the companion, something much greater was happening inside your soulmate's heart. For the first time in a long while, uncertainty was losing its grip. Imagine carrying unanswered questions for months, replaying memories, wondering whether certain opportunities had already slipped away forever. Then imagine one conversation helping you finally understand what truly matters. That kind of clarity changes the way a person walks, speaks, and even dreams about tomorrow. This wasn't about escaping the past. It was about preparing for the future. And here's something that makes the entire story even more fascinating. Someone who observed the meeting later shared a simple thought. They said your soulmate looked as though they had been reminded of someone they could never completely forget. No names were mentioned. No dramatic declarations were made. Just one quiet observation that refused to disappear. Could that memory have been connected to you? Only time can answer that. But sometimes the strongest connections aren't revealed through loud words. They're revealed through the choices people make once the conversation is over. Notice this carefully. Your soulmate didn't spend the rest of the night searching for distractions. They didn't appear interested in impressing anyone. Instead, they chose stillness over noise. Reflection over confusion. That decision alone suggests that something meaningful had shifted beneath the surface. Life rarely transforms through one spectacular event. More often, it changes because one honest realization finally outweighs years of hesitation. Perhaps that's why this story continues to grow. Because people sensed a change they couldn't explain. Before we continue, if this story has sparked your curiosity or reminded you that every journey carries hidden chapters, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe if these stories resonate with you, and pass this video along to someone who enjoys meaningful mysteries. Sometimes another perspective helps uncover details we might otherwise miss. Now the biggest question still remains unanswered. Who was the mysterious person? And why did they seem completely certain that your soulmate was about to make a decision capable of changing everything? That answer begins to emerge next, and once the final pieces fall into place, you'll understand why last night's encounter was never really about being caught at all. It was about discovering the one truth that could no longer stay hidden. Every mystery reaches a moment when scattered clues stop competing with one another, and quietly begin forming a single picture. This is that moment. Stay with me, because the question that echoed through everyone's mind, who were they with, is finally about to reveal its deeper meaning. And strangely enough, the answer is not about a person. It's about a turning point. As dawn approached, something unexpected happened. Your soulmate didn't call anyone to explain where they had been. They didn't try to defend themselves against rumors or chase after opinions. Instead, they carried themselves with a calmness that hadn't been seen in a very long time. That kind of peace doesn't appear by accident. It usually arrives after someone has faced a truth they could no longer avoid. Think about it. People spend so much energy trying to control how they're seen by others. But the moment someone stops worrying about appearances, they begin living differently. That is exactly what seemed to happen after last night's meeting. One quiet observer later described the scene in a way that stayed with everyone. They said, it looked like someone who had finally remembered who they were. Those words spread slowly, but they carried far more weight than any rumor. What could possibly cause such a change? Perhaps the person your soulmate met wasn't there to give them new answers. Perhaps they simply reminded them of the answers that had been waiting inside all along. That possibility changes everything. Because when clarity replaces confusion, fear begins to lose its voice. Your soulmate had spent so much time wondering whether certain doors had already closed forever. Whether missed opportunities could ever return. Whether some connections were simply meant to remain unfinished stories. Last night challenged every one of those beliefs. Imagine standing at a crossroads. One path leads back into uncertainty. The other asks you to become brave enough to trust what your heart has quietly known for a long time. Most people hesitate. But every once in a while, someone finally takes that first step. That is why the energy surrounding this story feels so different. It isn't driven by shock. It isn't fueled by drama. It's carried forward by transformation. And transformation is always more powerful than speculation. Now another detail has surfaced. As your soulmate walked away from that unforgettable conversation, they paused one final time, not because someone called their name, but because something caught their attention. A familiar place. A familiar memory. For just a few seconds, they stood completely still, almost as if reliving a chapter they once believed was over. Sometimes life doesn't ask us to erase the past. Sometimes it asks us to understand it. Only then can we move forward without carrying unnecessary weight. Could that memory have been connected to the person they hope to reconnect with someday? No one can answer that with certainty. But one thing became impossible to ignore. Their future no longer looked like it did only a day before. That's why the title of this story was never meant to encourage suspicion. It was meant to invite a different question. What if being caught wasn't about hiding from someone else? What if it was about finally being caught by the truth they had been avoiding? That is the kind of discovery capable of changing an entire journey. Every meaningful story contains a moment when the outside world believes one thing while something completely different is happening inside. Last night was exactly that kind of moment. The crowd saw a meeting. Destiny saw a breakthrough. The rumors searched for a scandal. Reality quietly revealed a new beginning. And perhaps that's the greatest reminder hidden within this entire story. Not every unexpected encounter is meant to divide people. Sometimes it exists to help someone become the person they were always meant to be. So if this story found you today, don't rush to judge unfinished chapters, whether they belong to someone else or even to your own life. The most remarkable endings often begin with moments that everyone misunderstands. And maybe, just maybe, last night wasn't the ending of your soulmate's story. It was the first page of a completely different 1.1. Final piece remains, and without it, everything you've heard so far is only half the story. Stay with this last chapter, because the greatest discoveries are rarely hidden in the loudest moments, they're found in the quiet decisions no one notices until much later. By the following morning, the rumors had already spread in every direction. Some people were convinced they knew exactly what had happened. Others confidently repeated stories they had never witnessed. Yet something remarkable occurred. Not one of those stories changed your soulmate's direction. Why? Because once someone has found clarity, outside opinions lose much of their power. That is one of life's quiet truths. When your purpose becomes stronger than other people's assumptions, your path begins to feel lighter. The mysterious meeting from the night before was never about creating confusion. It was about removing it. Your soulmate walked into that conversation carrying uncertainty. They walked away carrying intention. That difference cannot always be seen, but it can always be felt. Imagine standing in front of two doors. One opens toward fear, endless what-ifs, and waiting for perfect certainty. The other opens toward honesty, courage, and finally accepting what your heart has been whispering all along. Every person reaches that crossroads eventually. Last night, it seems your soulmate finally chose which door to walk through. Perhaps that's why the expression on their face changed. Not because someone else changed them. Because they changed themselves. And that is the beginning of every meaningful transformation. Here's the beautiful irony. The question everyone asked was, who were they with? But the wiser question became, who did they become after that meeting? Sometimes the greatest encounter in life isn't with another person. Sometimes it's with a clearer version of yourself. That realization can reshape an entire future. Maybe that's why this story reached you today. Not to encourage guessing. Not to invite suspicion. But to remind you that every meaningful connection grows stronger when people become honest with themselves first. Life has an incredible way of arranging moments that seem confusing at first, only to reveal their purpose later. The pieces don't always fit immediately. But they do fit. And when they finally do, you realize that what once looked like coincidence was actually preparation. If this story gave you something to think about, I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. If you enjoy thoughtful stories like this, consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who appreciates meaningful journeys. Sometimes another person sees a detail that helps complete the picture for everyone. So before you leave, remember this. Not every unexpected night hides a secret. Sometimes it reveals a lesson. Not every mysterious meeting creates distance. Sometimes it creates the courage to move forward. And not every unanswered question is meant to stay unanswered forever. The next chapter of every journey belongs to those who remain patient enough to let the full story unfold. Until then, carry this thought with you. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It arrives one quiet realization at a time. And when that final realization appears, everything begins to make sense. Every unforgettable story leaves behind one final echo, the kind that stays with you long after the words have ended. If you've stayed with this journey until now, then you've already realized this was never just about one mysterious night. It was about what that night awakened. And the final revelation is quieter than anyone imagined, but far more powerful. As another day began, life around your soulmate returned to normal. People continued their routines. The conversations faded. The speculation slowly disappeared. Yet inside your soulmate, something had permanently changed. There are moments when the outside world sees an ordinary sunrise, while one person quietly steps into a completely different version of their future. This was one of those moments. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" Instead, a new question took its place. What if I've been closer to my next chapter than I ever realized? That single shift in perspective can change an entire life. Think about your own journey. How many opportunities have seemed confusing simply because you could only see one page of the story? We often mistake unfinished chapters for final endings. But life rarely works that way. It keeps writing long after we think the book has closed. Perhaps that's why this story reached you today. Not to convince you that every mystery has a dramatic ending, but to remind you that clarity almost always arrives after patience. Last night's encounter wasn't the conclusion everyone expected. It became the beginning of honest choices. The beginning of quieter confidence. The beginning of letting go of fear that had quietly occupied too much space. And maybe that is the greatest breakthrough anyone can experience. Because the strongest transformations don't happen when the world applauds. They happen when someone finally becomes honest with themselves. Imagine looking back months from now. Would anyone remember the rumors? Probably not. But your soulmate will remember the decision made within their own heart. That memory will stay long after every opinion has disappeared. There is something beautiful about that. People chase extraordinary signs, yet overlook ordinary moments that quietly redirect entire futures. One conversation.